All right, we're back. We are COMP308 in the winter 2019 semester at Centennial, and we're week 4, part 2 of our broadcast. We're just talking about an intro to Mongoose now. So we used this last PowerPoint. We talked about Mongo, and now we're going to use the PowerPoint that the second PowerPoint that I put up online for you guys, which is lesson 4, week 4, part B, which is this one. Intro to Mongoose. So what is Mongoose? Mongoose is a node module. That's what it is. Even though MongoDB is schemaless, Mongoose offers you this way of making a schema and structuring your code a little better. You need to install it before you can use it. So it looks like this in your npm project. Let's just try this out. So first, before we move on with the PowerPoint, I want to do that at the same time. So we're going to go to out to my project. So last week we had COMP308 W2019, and then it was lesson 3B, this one. I'm going to copy this one on my desktop and then kind of paste it. And I'm going to show you a different way of using your old project without deleting the .git folder. So we kind of did that last week. We deleted the .git folder, and this week I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to take away the remote. Okay, so I'm going to rename this thing lesson 4B, because you guys are the B team. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into Visual Studio Code. So here's the Visual Studio Code. And like I said, I'm not deleting the .git folder. What I want to do, though, is I want to create a new repository online. So if I go online, I created this one earlier for the other group, but for you guys, we have to make a new one. So I'm making a new repository called COMP308 W2019 and lesson 4B. And when we do that, we're going to get this new link, this new remote, right? So I want to grab this right here, these last 2 lines of code, copy them, but I'm not going to use them right away, okay? So I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to kind of go back in here. So control backtick my terminal, right? And I'm going to type the following: git remote remove origin. And what this does is it removes the old remote. Remember that the remote is just a connection, a friendly name for the connection that connects your local Git installation to your GitHub repo, okay? So I need to remove the old one because I've copied my file, right? I copied my folder and made it, version 4, and before it was week 3. So now what I need to do is install the new remote. So I'm going to paste the new remote information in and press enter to push my old remote and all the stuff that I had before to my new repository. Okay, so 3 steps here. So remote remove origin, RM for remove. Then I added my origin back in with the new, I'm pointing to a new repository, and then I push to the master branch of the new repository. So why am I doing this? Why don't I just delete .git folder? Because I can retain my commits. That's why. I don't have to delete my commits. I'm not starting from scratch. I can still keep my commits from last week and also move forward on a new line of production, of development. Sometimes I like to do this if I want to, almost like it's better than creating a new branch. I have a whole different project. I'm not affecting the other project at all. And have a new line of development that I like to do. And there's no risk that I'm going to bounce anything back into the old project at all. Okay, so this is done. A couple of changes I want to make. Package.json, I'm going to add a new package, right? Remember we talked about this? But I want to change the name of it from lesson 3B to lesson 4B, right? I need to do that. And it's not the Express generator demo we're doing. I'm actually doing a little demo on Mongo and Mongoose. So Mongo and Mongoose demo. That's what it is. I'm saving that. And then I'm going to use control backtick. I'm just changing the description. That's all I'm doing. Control backtick. I'm going to clear the screen. And what I want to do is in here, I want to install Mongoose. So again, I'm going to do an npm. I'm going to do an npm install, I for install, Mongoose, right? -- save. And remember what -- save does? It saves the development dependency for the node package that I'm loading. So press enter. It goes out, grabs that node package and installs it inside of my package.json file. Actually, sorry, lists it in my package.json file and puts the files in node modules. All right, alongside of this, I like to have my dev dependencies. So I'm going to say npm install, and then it's @types Mongoose. Remember what this is? It allows me to put my development dependencies in there. So it gives me some code hinting from Mongoose. So I have some code coloring and code completion that, as part of Visual Studio Code. I'm going to press enter here. Remember, @types is basically grabbing the type definition library from Mongoose. So that Visual Studio Code gives you some good IntelliSense. Are we good? Yes? All right. So then if you notice, what happens is I have two parts to package.json. I have these dependencies here from last week, plus Mongoose, which I just installed today at version 5.4.9 right here. And then @types Mongoose, I also have this one at 5.3.12. So these are the two things I just added in. So we're expanding. As you can see, we've got our package.json files quite bigger. One thing I also like to do, because we've been playing around with repositories a little bit more. I'm going to clear the screen here, and I'm going to say an npm init. Remember, I can reinitialize npm, but what that does is it runs the little batch file, the little wizard, but it also allows me to automatically detect my repository. So I can do this, add my repository in, and then press enter. So I'm just pressing enter, enter, enter. And now you can see that the repository information is added in at the bottom. All right? That's pretty cool. So I got a private repository, a private little package, and I've added everything in. So that's the thing I changed so far in my package.json file. I added Mongoose support. And let's put this up on GitHub. So I'm going to click on this little area here, this little Git symbol or version control symbol. Click on this little plus sign to stage everything, and then enter a commit message, added Mongoose support, right? Click on this little check mark, and then go to the ellipses next to it, and then click push. And what that does is going to push everything up on GitHub now. So all the latest changes that I made for my project are up on GitHub. Great. So now that I've installed Mongoose, let's continue with the PowerPoint. So that's the installation piece. So you can see that that's the first one. The first one is installing Mongoose. And you can see as of this writing, the original one was 4.6.5. We're at 5.13 or something like that. So we did this installation. It installs everything in the node modules folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to need this something called a URI. And the URI is usually like this, some kind of MongoDB : // and then the name of the username and password, if we have any, for our local database, and some kind of port, as an example, that we need, and potentially a database. So if you look here, by default, this is the minimum amount. So MongoDB : / localhost, and then some other information. Okay, so that's the connection string that we're going to use with Mongoose. Are we good so far? Let's go and do some coding. So one of the things that we want to do is in our app.js, you can see that I have a couple sections. Here's one section where I've added in some, been doing some requires, right? So these are all the different modules we've added in from last week, right? And if you notice here, we have this thing called an index router. Okay, so between the index router and my logger, I want to put this new command to support Mongoose. So what it looks like, we'll just call this the database setup. It looks like this, guys. Let Mongoose equal to require Mongoose. Okay, so that's the first thing. So we're making a reference to Mongoose. I remember what this does. We use the require keyword to, basically include another module we just downloaded, the Mongoose module. So now we have support for Mongoose in this file, and only this file. Okay, but the next step is what I want to do is I want to connect to my local database. For this, I recommend we create a new folder for configuration purposes. So here in my folder structure, I'm going to click down here. I'm going to click this new folder button, and we're going to call this new folder config. Now your folder structure should look something like this. Config, node modules, public, roots, views. Here's my config folder. In my config folder, I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to call this db.js. So I have a db configuration. That's what I'm doing here. Okay. And I'd like to keep this separate. It's kind of common practice to do this. And the reason for this is we want to keep all our configuration files separate, where we can go into that one place and modify that one file in that one area, and then it modifies the entire document, right? Sometimes we put common variables, globals, something that we want to keep track of, we put them in here. So I want to start off with module exports in my file, and I want to say that it's equal to a object. How does this work? How does module exports and this whole thing works, right? So remember that module.exports is what we want to put in, of course, not just module exports. Remember that each module is what? Each file is what? What is it for when it comes to Node? Does anyone remember? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Sorry? Who said that? It's a module, but when we say it's a module, what is a module for this particular thing? How should we consider it? It's like a container. I want you to think about it as a container, right? And it's an object container. And usually think about this as each module or each file in Node by default is like two curly braces that are empty inside. Okay, that's what I want you to think about this. So if I do this, actually, module exports is equal to this, it's like, okay, there's nothing inside of it, thanks, right? If I want to add something to the module, I could simply do something like this. I could say, let's make a property. So I'm going to call this property URI. And again, key value pairs. I can say that I want MongoDB, right? This is going to equal localhost, then slash, and then the name of the database. What's our database name? Test, right? So you can see that this is a key value pair. There's a key here, URI, and the value is here. All right, so this is all we need. If we save this now, URI is a property of this file, db.js. So db.js has a module, because we put module exports. Inside the curly braces is one property. That means that I've exposed the URI property to other parts of my code. That's how I want you to see it. All right, so how does this work? If I go to app.js now, and I want to connect to that particular URI, right? I'm going to type in the following. So again, I've got Mongoose, require Mongoose, and now we've defined DB. I'm going to say that let DB equal to, we're going to use the require keyword now, require, right? And I'm going to put in, again, you can use single quotes or double quotes here. Let's use single quotes to be consistent. Slash config slash DB. Okay, so think about what I just did. This is pretty simple, and this is a good example of what we're going to do more and more of. So I got a config folder. Inside my config, I got db.js. db.js, all it does is it defines a property called URI with a string value. That's all it is, right? And because we're using module exports, it exposes the URI property outside of this file. We can use other places. Well, here what I've done is I've defined a new variable called DB, and I've made a reference to the config/db.js file, right? I've actually pointed to it here. So if I do something like this, watch, db dot, guess what? I have access to URI. Because URI now is a property of DB. DB is an object, all right? And that's a beautiful thing. That means we can make as many of those as we want, and we can use global properties or whatever that we want to define in one file, or more than one file. What we want to do here is we want to kind of do something like this. I'm going to point Mongoose, right, to the database URI. That's what I want to do, right? So the way to do that is Mongoose. We're going to use the Mongoose keyword dot. And you can see that I'm getting great code hinting here because of my, I've used, at types. I've got that stuff going, right? I want to select connection, right? Sorry, connect. I want to connect where? A URI, which is db.uri. And so what this does is says, hey, connect Mongoose to the local database. That's what I'm doing here, okay? Next part, I want to define MongoDB. MongoDB then is going to be pointing to my Mongoose connection, right? So now MongoDB, what it is a reference to the connection itself, okay? And because I have that, I could do something like this. I could say that, well, let's make this lowercase because MongoDB, all my identifiers should start off with lowercase. I could say something like MongoDB then dot on. I want you to think about on as like add event listener. That's equivalent. On what? On an error, on some kind of error. I want to console.error.bind. I want to bind to the console kind of an error message that says connection error. Let's use this. Okay. So basically, on any error, it's just going to pump out the error to the console. And which console we're talking about? The local console, not the browser console. Okay, this is all server-side stuff. Also, MongoDB also can do something called once, which means one time, I want you to open a connection, and I want you to have a connection callback, an anonymous connection callback, that basically says that we're connected. So one time when we're connected, I want to say, I want to do a console log that says connected to MongoDB. Okay. And that, my friends, these lines here, again, we require Mongoose. We get the configuration from the little other file we made. We connect to the local local connection, local server. We set up, we kind of make a reference to the connection itself, and then we listen for any errors or when the connection to the server is open, or we're connecting to it, okay? And these things aren't completely required, but what they do is, well, this one is, but only, we don't need to use this callback. The open basically opens a connection to the server. That's what it does, okay? So how does this look if I was to run this thing? So if I press Control backtick, and let's see if how this works. One thing to note is I must have my MongoDB server running in the background like this, right? If I don't have this MongoDB server running in the background, this will fail. So if I do nodemon now, nodemon, you can see that it's connecting. There's this thing that says, hey, I got this deprecation warning kind of thing, right? And the deprecation warning, if you notice, what it does is it says, hey, your current URL string parser is deprecated. I'm going to come back next week with a fix for this, hopefully, because I'm using some code that I've used in the past that works great, but it obviously doesn't work good here. So here's a problem. Do you notice that it's connecting to the server? And remember we had that problem where it didn't connect last time? Well, here's the error. This is a great example of the error, right? And a lot of times it's because my server is conked out. So here's my server. And again, if I press Control C, I have one connection open, it says. And if I restart this part, a lot of times it'll just connect. See? So we're connected. So you should be getting something like connected to MongoDB. All right? That's all we're looking for. This connection doesn't do anything for us. It's just proving connectivity. We've got connectivity. Yay! Right? Without connectivity, you can't do anything. But this does nothing for us. Okay? It doesn't do, there's no functionality here. It's just connectivity. So now, here comes the tough part. So I've connected, but I want to create a route to show off. Imagine if I want to show off all these contacts that I made in my, in my database. I had a bunch of contacts I just created in my database. I want to show them, right? How do I do that? In code. Well, I need a route. I need some way to get to my contacts. Some kind of web link that takes me there, okay? So I need that. I need a page to display my contacts. Someplace my contacts are going to show up, right? I need that. I need some kind of routing information and configuration and a model to give to Mongoose to say my contacts are all structured like this, okay? There's a lot of things I need. These are all I need, right? And I need to do all these things all at the same time, by the way. One can't be there without the other one. I can't have a page that tries to display contacts without some kind of logic that connects the contacts. I can't have the logic that connects the contacts without the schema to do that, right? And I can't use the schema without using the logic to connect the schema with each other. It's one of those, right? You have to kind of have all those parts together. So there's really no great place to start. I'd like to start here. I want to think about a route that I'm going to connect to. And notice I have this roots folder, and right now my roots folder, all it does is handle my main root, home, about, products, services, and so on. I need another one. I need one that only shows my contact list, okay? Let's just call this set of roots contact. So I'm going to go into root, make a new file. I'm going to call this thing contact.js. Just like the other root, what I need is at the top, express, and this router part right here. Okay, so I need these two pieces right here. I'm going to go into my contact and paste. Okay, and at the bottom, if you notice, there's also this module exports line. I need that too, because I want to export the stuff that I build here outside of here and put them inside, bring them into my app.js. So this right here, what it does is it creates a structure, almost like bookends, to start working with my new root. I also know that I'm going to do some Mongo stuff, so I'm going to do that require Mongo thing again. I'm going to say Mongoose is equal to require Mongoose, because I know I'm probably going to need Mongoose in this file as well. Okay, cool. Well, I can't connect to Mongoose. I can't do anything with Mongoose. I can't even route Mongoose unless I have a schema. So now let's do that. So, so my schema is going to go here. So I'm just going to use some comments here, just for almost like pseudocode. So, kind of connect or create a reference to the database schema, right? That's what I need to do. I don't have a database schema, so I need to create it, and I'm going to put it in something called the models folder. Now, remember, we talked about this briefly, model view controller, where a model is just a class that defines how a database is structured. All right, so they do not get the hint. I am working. You know this. So under the model, I'm going to create a new folder called models. And under models, I'm going to make a new file called contact, because I'm going to make a contact model, contact.js. I made it a couple times, right? I've made it here on routes and here on models. And some people might say, like, why are you using the same name, man? Why? It's confusing. So the way you should read it is the model, the contact model, the contact route, the index route, the whatever, So it usually comes like that, right? The, DB configuration, as an example. So here I've got my contact model that I'm making right at the top. And again, so there's some unique code that Mongoose gives us when it comes to making a model. And I'm going to try and explain it as succinctly as I can. So one, of course, is we need to do this Mongoose is equal to require Mongoose. Now, every time I do this, some people have asked in the past, why do we keep on requiring the same thing over and over again? Can't we just require it once and import it somewhere else from somewhere else? And the answer is yes, you can. You can import it inside an app, and you can pass Mongoose from the app.js into the other modules. I'm not going to do that because it's additional syntax that might confuse you later on when you look at it and go, what's happening here? I don't get it, right? So let's leave it alone for now. We may reduce later. Let's make it fat for now, and we'll make it leaner later. Actually, that's kind of a thing for me. I always say optimization is bad. Don't optimize first. Make it work first, and then optimize later on. All right, so what we want to do here is we want to create a model class. Here's a model class we want to create. And what I want to do is I want to create something called, I don't know, we'll call it context schema. Here's our context schema. And we're going to use Mongoose. Here's mongoose.schema. And what Mongoose schema does is it requires if you hover over this thing, it basically says that it creates a generic class. And I want you to think of the schema class as another factory. So the schema factory creates a custom schema class and stores a reference to it inside of context schema, or whatever you want to call it. Okay? So here it requires an object. Let me just make this a little bit cleaner. So the object is basically almost like a parameterized configuration for the schema. Okay, so I know I want a first name. Notice I'm not making any quotations here. And what type is the first name? It's a string type. Okay? And you know what? I also need a last name because that's what my model looks like. And that's also a string. And I also have an age, which is a number. Notice that the data types for the schema are all in caps. All right, so kind of capitalized. Okay. And these names are just properties of the schema. And if you hover over them, they say property, string constructor, property, right? So these properties are part of the context schema. That's what we're doing here. So the first part is let's create a schema, first part. And think about a schema as a table structure, in old kind of traditional databases. The other thing that we're missing here is I always like to specify, you don't have to, but I like to specify the collection. We can say the collection is called first, right? So we called it. This specifies which collection this schema refers to, all right? So that it's not inferred. So that's the first part. But we know this whole thing is inside of a module. So now to complete this, we need to do a module.exports. And this is where it's a little different than in other places. We're going to use the mongoose.model, right? And I'll explain this in a second, where we pass in the name of our database to connect to, right? Our database is called test, right? And then the schema that we're going to use. Well, we just made it, context schema. Contact schema. All right. So what the heck did we just make, right? Well, we made a model for our database. But here's something interesting. Remember that module.exports is just, a couple of curly braces, like a container with nothing inside of it. Okay, whoa. Now what we've done is we said, whoa, don't point to an empty container. Point to this Mongoose model. And think about this as another factory. So here's the factory. And what it does is it returns, if I go back to my module exports, it returns all this, right? Module exports now points to this new custom model that's created by Mongoose, which has been parameterized with our parameters, first name, last name, and age. So therefore, this file, contact.js, which is inside the models folder, is a model with those three properties. I want you to hear, when I say is a, it's like a class. It is a class with those three properties, the first name, last name, and age. If you want to relate this to ASP.NET, which some of you have taken lately, think about this as a model that's going to connect to something like how we use the entity framework, right? It's an model class, if you will. Okay. Yes. You can, but once I start using TypeScript, you're going to want to kill yourself because it's even worse than this, right? And we're going to do it, but we're going to, remember I said we're going to go like really slow. I'm going to show you the big, bulky, ugly way to do it, and then we're going to go back and tighten. If I start using TypeScript for this, let Mongoose equals to require Mongoose would be not that way at all. It'd be import Mongoose as, you know, and all this other stuff. It's not the normal way you would see it online either. So I want to start with this, and then we'll go back to the other one later. One good thing about TypeScript is it'll give us more information than this, right? Okay, so we've got our model, our Mongoose model class. And if I go back into my route, which I was just creating, I can start using it, right? Because this is one of the reasons why I did this. I did this so I can start using my new custom route for contacts, right? So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to say that, well, let contact, right? So for each contact, let's require that a contact means that it is something to do with, and again, I have to go up. I'm inside roots. I have to go up one step to the root of my folder, then down into models, and then into contacts. So I've got to go up one, into models, and then into contact. Okay, now take a look. When I do this and I hover over this, I get this. Like it literally reads the model from my contact models, right? The contact model that I just wrote over here. So this is a reference. Contact then is just a reference to what's inside this folder. It literally can, you know, allows us to split our stuff among different files, right? Using the new ES6 import and require kind of thing. Okay, so this is the first part. The first part is, hey, can we get a connection? So contact now is kind of referring to the model class we want to use to connect to our database. The next part, what we want to try and do is we want to use the router. We want to say that, and by the way, just to give us a little bit of code, I want to say, let's get my contact list page. That's what I want to kind of do. We don't have a contact list page, but I want to do that. And I want to do this read operation. That's what I'm going to do, my read operation. Remember we talked about CRUD, create, read, update, delete, and today we're only doing read. You're going to see why. So the next part is we're going to say router.get, and we're going to say that we're going to go to the root of the thing. Now, notice that I'm not going to a different file. I'm not looking at a different space at all. And why is that? Because I'm almost like creating a separate section for our website. Think about our contact list as another subfolder, if you will. It's not on the main root. So I'm going to say, well, what I want is I want to request a callback for request, response, and next object. That's what I want. It's an anonymous callback. I'm going to use the fat arrow function for that. And inside this anonymous callback, what I want to do is I want to find my contact. So I'm going to use contact. And because it's a schema, I can go find. Gee, doesn't this look familiar? Right? Just like we did before, right? With our find command on Mongo. And then what I want to do in my find command is I want to say, well, okay, I need a callback function. So I'm going to pass in a function that has two properties, an error and something called contact lists, which we're making up. You can call that whatever you like. And then it looks like we have something called callback hell happening. We have a callback, and then we have a callback within a callback. And then, by the way, this doesn't stop. It's going to be a callback within a callback within a callback. And down the rabbit hole we go. And this is where beginners to JavaScript look at this and they're like, we never learned this. I want to cry, right? Because it's like totally different than what you've ever seen before. This is a different type of JavaScript than your grandmother's JavaScript, right? So, you know, don't panic is what I'm going to say, right? But what this is basically saying is this. Hey, whenever we go to the main root of this file, we want to create this callback function, an anonymous function, this part right here. And inside this anonymous function, we want to use the find command, right? That belongs to the model we just created. We're searching for, you know, a generic we're kind of reading everything from the database. If there's an error, store it in here inside the error parameter, error variable. If we get a contact, if we're able to get access stuff, return anything we get from our database inside contact list. That's what it does. So contact list stores everything that we get from the database, everything, in a list of documents from that particular collection. So it reads the collection, takes each document and stores it in here as an array list of documents, if you will. Okay? But first we got to check for errors. So if we have an error, then we're going to say something like, well, return a console.error. And we want to show that error off. What's the error? Why can't we connect? What's the problem? Did we put the wrong information in? What did we get? And we can probably do something else under here, but what I'm going to probably do is use an else statement for now. And for now, what I want to do is I want to pump everything else out to the console. I want to say like an actual console.log. Let's pump out the contact list, okay? So this is going to cause us a problem, okay? It's going to cause us a problem because it's going to pause the server. The server wants to continue forever, right? But it's not returning anything. I'm not rendering anything. I'm going to go to a website and it's going to return nothing. So the server is going to crap out here if I do this. And I'm going to do this anyway because the first thing I want to do is I want to see, can I get the contact list information? Can I read it from the database? And can I show it somewhere? Not on a website, just somewhere right now, okay? And that's what I'm doing here. What I really want to do later on, though, and I'm going to put this in kind of in comments because this is what I really want to do. I want to do a res.render, right? So I want to render a page that is going to look like this. I want to have a contact section, right? And I'm going to go to the index of that page, of that section. And what I want to do is inside there, I want to pass in a title property, which is going to be contact list. And I also want to have a contact list that I pass in, which is of type contact list. Now, you guys are going to look at this and go, what? I don't understand. How can I pass contact list? So contact list, this one, is actually a member variable or a member property of this scope. Okay? That's what contact list is. But this contact list refers to this one. Okay? So remember what I do? I find all the items in the database and I store them inside this part right here. And then I'm going to just pass this. I'm not going to call this anything I wanted, but I wanted to do this so you can see that this is okay. Right? But right now, it's not going to go anywhere. Why? Because, hey, guess what? I don't have views to do this. I don't have the HTML stuff, the logic to do this right now. I just don't. Okay? Remember I need to do everything at once? This is that everything on one step. Okay? Cool. So I finished off my route, kind of. Let's go back to my app.js. So here's my app.js, and I connect to the database, and I need to define my route. And it looks something like this. I want to call this the contact router, right? Because the contact router, what it's going to do is it's going to allow us to, hold on a second, make sure that I get this right. I don't want to waste your time. Yeah, the contact router, what it does for us is it includes, here's contact router. It's going to include the router we just defined inside of our page. I'm going to say router or routes/contact. Okay? So this includes it in here. Remember, there's two parts to the router. One part is I need the logic for the route, how to do the routes. That's the one thing I have here. I've included it in my app.js. But now I need to use the route. And if you look down around line, I would say 37, where it says app.use, this is where I need to use the route. And I'm going to use the route like this, app.use, and instead of going slash, it's going to be like, I don't know, something like contact list. So whenever whenever the user enters contact list, it's going to take me to the contact router. Are we good? Let's go over this one more time so we can see it, okay? First part, we set up the database connection. We've connected the database. We know we're connecting properly, right? Next, we define a new route for the contact list information, which we defined here under routes contact. Under the contact route, we did a couple things. We declared our model, right? Because we can't do the route without having a schema already defined. I'm going to keep backtracking. In the model schema, right? Here's the contact schema. We defined a schema with first name, last name, and age. And we pointed at this first collection, right? We exported the model, right, by using module exports and pointing to the test database. Going back to the route. Now we're here again. Now we're going to create a new route, and we're going to use the get method. The get method reads from a particular, from the user's URL. They put in the URL, whatever the user's entered. And we're going to have a callback, a request, response, and next parameters. It's going to send to this callback. And in the callback, we're going to find all the elements in the database, store them in this thing called contact list, check if there's any errors. If there's not, we're going to output the contact list to a console log for now. Okay? And then, let's head back to the app.js. And then, further down, we're going to check to see, we're going to listen for anybody that tries to go to this thing called contact list, which is where we're going to apply this new route. Whew. It looks convoluted, like one pointing to the other one, pointing to this one, but actually it's pretty clear if you follow the logic, right? It's like I build my dependencies first, my schema first, then my route, then include my route on my app.js, then use my route down here. That's what I'm doing, okay? How does this work now? So if I save this and if I go back, control backtick, you can see that I'm still connected to Mongo. This is good, right? And when I go to up here to my local host, if I put in localhost 3000, I can see this. Yay! And there's no link to my contact list, right? But what I can do is I can actually type it up here. I can go, let's go contact-list. If I go here, it's not going to return anything to us visually. There's nothing to see. There's no website. However, back here, guess what? We get all this information. So this is a proof that our concept is working because it's returned our 3 pieces of user information from the database. And we're just printing it out here inside of our server console. Are we good? Do you guys get this? If you don't, we can't continue to the next step, which is rendering this stuff in a view. All right? Yes?
How did we get the model to better appear?
Well, yes, we can have whatever we want. We've just chosen to use Mongoose to create a schema. We could have a bunch of different things in the model, right? But here what we're doing is we're actually reading. Mongoose is good for a structured read of MongoDB, right? And I think I prefer it that way. I guess I'm a structured kind of guy. Could I read something from the database without it? Yes, there's other ways of doing it, but I like to use Mongoose for structure, okay? All right, so this is one part. Are you with me? Does everyone understand / have they tried this? Because basically, guess what? By the end of today, I'm going to give you an exercise that's due next week, and you need to know how to do this, right? Okay, so good. This is nice, but guess what's happened here on my website? It goes, man, it's probably going to say like, oh, I'm timing out, man. I'm not getting a response from the server at all. Like, I need to respond to this thing, right? So the way to do that is we need to set up some views. Now, before we get there, I think we've added some really cool stuff. I'm going to put this up on GitHub so you guys can see the code that I've used, right? So I'm going to go to GitHub, and I modified my app.js, my DB, and all that stuff. Really what I've done is I've connected to the database, and I've created my contact model. So let's just say, created contact model, right? And I'm just going to push this to GitHub, okay? And I'm doing that through the Visual Studio Code built-in source control. All right, so you should have, in a second, it's not quite done. There it is. You should have all my code up on GitHub you can look at, as opposed to me talking about it. All right, This is great, but it's not anywhere near complete. You can see that I've already commented out in my routes contact.js. You can see that there's an area that I commented out. I want to make this work, right? But in order for me to make this work, because I don't have an index page, we're going to run into some problems. So I need to make another section called contacts and another page called index.ejs. Let's do that first. So I'm going to go in my views. You can see that I only have my index.ejs, but I want to make another section called contacts. So a new folder called contacts. And inside this folder, I want to make another file called index.ejs. And man, I got to include the navigation. I got to include all that stuff again. Man, imagine if I had to like take care of navigation bars across 2 files, 3 files, 4 files, 5 files, 10 files, 100 files, and every one of those navigation bars I got to keep up to date. That's insane, right? So this is part of your assignment 1. You need, remember in your assignment 1, I said you need to create something called a partials folder, and inside there have a header and a footer file, because what I'd like to do is I only want to have one place for my main navigation. If my main navigation changes, it changes everywhere, right? This is going back to the ASP.NET way of doing things. Remember, with ASP.NET, people who took that course, we had partial files. For some people who did web forms, we're going to do that here. So the way to do that is I want to include my header and footer, but I need my header and footer separated out. So in my views, I'm going to right-click and go new folder. And I'm going to create this folder called partials. In my partials folder, I'm going to have 2 more files. Right now, they're going to be empty. One of them is going to be called header, right, .ejs. And I'm going to make another one called footer.ejs. So header and footer. What I want to do is I want to store everything in my header that's from the top part of my file. All right, so inside my partials folder, in my header.ejs, I want to take everything from my index.ejs that's right now. So from the top, from my doctype.html, all the way down to the bottom of my nav, my main nav, which is something like this, right? So all that, just before my content starts. I want to cut this out. Don't panic, right? I'm going to go to my header and just paste it in. And so my header only includes my navigation and part of my HTML. Remember that EJS is not HTML. EJS is almost like components that I can put together. I can include as many of these little piece parts together that I want to be as dynamic as I'd like to be, right? Same thing for my footer. So in my index.ejs here, I have this footer information, my JavaScript connections and all that stuff. I want to take this, cut it. I'm going to put this in my footer. Okay. So I've got 2 files, my header and my footer. And in my index, my regular index.ejs now, which looks like this, I mean, I need to include them somehow. And the great thing about this is that EJS provides a cool way, a very easy way of including headers and footers. And it looks like this. So %, right, include, and then the path to what you're including, /partials, right, /header.ejs, and then that's it. So what this does is because my partials file, header.ejs, is inside my partials folder, I don't need quotation marks at all. It just looks like this. And I include this file before everything else. It literally smashes it in there and expands it. Okay, that's what it does. Very similar to PHP if you've done PHP before, or like I said, old school .NET. Okay, and on the bottom, I want to do the same thing for my footer. So I want to say, you know, %include, the keyword include, and then /partials, and then /footer.ejs, right? And then we'll finish off that. So that's going to take care of this. So this pattern that I'm using right here is the exact same pattern that I want to use here, right? So again, I can actually copy and paste that whole thing for now. Let's just do that. We'll copy and paste this whole file and put it inside of this. Okay. And I can get rid of all this because I don't need it right now. I will in a second, something else though. So this file, which I'm using in my views contact EJS, is this is where I'm going to embed my content. So kind of embed content here. This is just for my my contact information. In my index.ejs, I have this container and it says welcome to whatever the page is, right? And it gives me some other stuff. Let's just get rid of all this other stuff, right? So I don't care about like my paragraph stuff, whatever. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit, get rid of all this. So it's just going to say welcome to whatever the page is, okay? And to check this to see if it works, let's go back to my website and see how that works. So if I go here and refresh, now you can see it says welcome home. And I know now for sure 100% I'm using partials, right? So if I go to about, products, services, and contact, those files are being constructed, right? I'm including the navigation on the top and the footer on the bottom, right? And that's how things are working. Questions so far? So why? Why did I do all this work? Because if I want a link to take us to my contact list page, and again, I'm going to use Bootstrap for this, right? So under Bootstrap, I want to create a button that looks like kind of like this. I'm going to use the blue. I'll make a blue button, and the blue button is going to take me to my contact-list page, which I don't have yet. Okay, but I only want this blue button to appear if I'm on my contacts page. Right? How do I do that? So here's my Jumbotron, and I want the blue button to appear only if I'm on the contact page. How do I do that? Any ideas? I can put if like this. I can say, well, I can use EJS. I can say if my title is equal to contact, right? Then, and I'll just take one of those away. Then I want to, remember I always close it up first like this. If it's equal to contact, if this is what it is, then I want to make a button that's button primary with an href of /contact-list. So it's a conditional button. This button doesn't always pop up. It only pops up when I'm on the contact page. Okay? And then here I can just say contact list. This is the kind of the friendly text that's in my button. Are you with me? So really what I'm doing is I'm using the index page as kind of like a menu, right? And depending on which one I go to, my contact information, I can get my contact list if I want. So why did I say this is part of your assignment 1? Because you want to use partials like this, okay? That's part of your requirement. Okay, so how does this work? So if I save this, and if I go back out to here, to my page, and if I refresh, you can see now that I have my little contact list button. It gets dynamically inserted in here. If I go to my another page, like home or about or products, nothing. It's not even there in my code. If I go like a inspect or view page source, you can see that there is none of that happening. There's no button whatsoever. I'm not hiding the button. It doesn't exist. But if I click on contact, suddenly the button exists, right? Because I'm using that EJS to create my page for me, a single page application. If I click on contact list now, it's going to go there, right? But remember that because I don't have any pages, the only place that's going to show up, right, is here, right, on my log right now. I want this information to show up on my page, which means I need another page to be described, right? And I've kind of partially done that work. If I go to my my routes, and if I go to contact.js, you can see that I'm trying to render something that says contacts index. So this is where I'm gonna render it. I want to return a title there too. I want to pass a title there, and I also want to pass the contact list array, which is packed full of the information that I got from my database. That's what I want to pass over. Okay. So that means in my views contacts, index.ejs, and here I want to start coding a new page. Okay, so here's my new page. Now, just to make it easier for me to code with Emmet, I'm going to pull this up. So under EJS, I'm going to change this to HTML, just so that I get, so my editor, I can configure my editor to view the thing I'm looking at as a different kind of file. So on the bottom right-hand corner where it says HTML, you can see I have different options here. And I can change them, like originally it was EJS, so it gives me support for this, doesn't give me errors. But if I choose HTML for now, what it does is it gives me Emmet support. And I want Emmet support because I don't want to type everything by hand. I want everything to be typed for me, right? Well, as much of it as I can get off, right? So here's what it's going to look like, the Emmet. Div dot container. So I want a div with a class of container. That's what it says, all right? And then inside of that, that's what that little arrow means. Inside of the div with the class of container, I want a div with a class of row, right? Inside of the div with the class of row, which is inside of div with the class of container, I want a div with a class of column-medium-offset 3, and then another class of column-medium-6. And if you look here, right, it's going to look like this. This is what it's going to generate for me. If I click here on top of this blue link, it actually does the generation. Okay, so I don't have to type that out. Let me just undo that so you can see that. So that's the line. I type one line and I get like 3 lines. Okay, so this is called Emmet, or quick HTML kind of coding, right? So there we go. And if you can see that this is the stuff I want to put my new stuff in here. This is where I want to put it. So how does this work? Why am I using column-medium-offset 3? Well, for this, I have to kind of think about drawing, on the blackboard. So here's my whiteboard. Here's my whiteboard. And imagine if I have my page. So here's my page, right? And on my, it's all right. Okay. You have nothing. Wait. On my page, I'm just drawing for you so you can see it. Here's on my page. On my page, it's blue. It's blue. Why is it blue? And let's make it bigger too. Wow. Sorry, guys. I was using this to create a storyboard lately. It's been pretty crazy. Bless you. So on my page, like I said, there's my page. Yay. I have a bunch of columns, right? So what Bootstrap does is it gives me all these columns. Each of these columns, by the way, guys, I'm just drawing them roughly. There's 12 columns that Bootstrap gives us, 12. Each column, or a grid, each column, say there's a bunch of columns here, 12 of them. Each grid is, or in this column, is 8% of my page, 8%. So that's what it represents. Roughly 8% of my page, okay? So each one of these columns, right? So if you think about this, if I've asked for, in my page, I've said column-medium-offset 3. What I'm saying is give me 3 of these columns, that's 24% on the left-hand side of my page. I want a space of 24%. And then on the right side, I'm looking for 6 columns in the middle where I'm going to cast my, my content. And that's what I'm doing here with Bootstrap. Now, this is old school Bootstrap, so I may have to adjust it. But at the end of the day, it's very similar. So that's the first part. Second part is I want to, for now, put an H1 tag. And in my H1 tag, I want to include a title. So I want to kind of bring in the title of my page, which is going to say contact list for now, right? So that's what this page will do. Let's just do this first. So it's to prove out that the routing works. So again, if I go back to the router, so if I go to routes, contact.js, let's uncomment out this area, bring these comments back in. I'm going to pass in the title, which is contact list, and it's the whole contact list itself. Let's see if this works. Again, I go back to my page. I go back to here, my contact page. I click on the contact list, and it says I could not find the partials header EJS. Why? Well, I know why. Because when we copied pasted, inside of my contacts page, it's actually the wrong pathing because I got to go up 1 to partials and down into header. In my original page, I didn't have to go up. I just had to go down. So that's why this was okay. But this one, I need to have a double dot here. Okay? And same thing for the footer. I go back to my page and I refresh. You can see now that I get contact list. So again, I'm here, my contact page. I click contact list. I get this contact list. And notice that on top here, there is no HTML. It just says contact-list. Okay, because that's what I've wanted. This must match what I have in my app.js. If you go back to this, and if I go back to my app.js, on the bottom, I'm looking for contact list. If I get contact list, if I have a match on the URL, then it takes me to contact router, which is what I'm doing. Contact router is right here. Okay? And this is the contact route. And what it's doing is it's displaying this index page right here. So what I want to do in my index page is, let's continue. I want to display everything in table format. So I want to kind of make a page break happen, and then I want to make a table. So here's what my table is going to look like. Okay. So I want a table, and inside my table, I want with a class of table and another class of table bordered. It's all Bootstrap stuff. A class of table striped, and a class of table hover. You can see the preview that I'm going to get in a second. Excuse me. So that's what this is, table hover. Okay. So if I click onto this, I get this. Table class, table border, table stripe, table hover. Okay. However, inside my table, I want a table row, right? And in my table row, I want a bunch of table headers. I want 3 of them, 3 table headers. And inside, you can see the structure that's happening on the left. Inside my table header, I want each of them is going to have a class of text-center. That's what I want. Okay, are we good? And I think that's good for now. Let's just click on that and make it go. Emmett, my friends. I want my first name to be in my first table row, and then I also want my last name, right? And then I want my age, right? So what this represents is a table of where my data is going to be distributed or displayed, right? And if I just leave this like this and go back to my list and refresh, I get that. So first name, last name, age. Okay. No data, but I got my table starting off. Yeah? Well, I don't know why that is. But we'll have to explore that afterwards. Okay, all right. Maybe you did something different than me. Okay, cool. So this is okay, but this is just a table header, and what I need is another table row that's repeatable. So this part here, let's just make some comments. So this part here is my header row. My header row is going to look like this, right? But I also need a template, right? I want you to think about this as a repeatable template row. What I mean by repeatable is it'll continue to repeat. It'll just keep on inserting more and more tables, the more data that I have, okay? So how do we do that? Well, I use EJS. I can say this. I can say %for, and we can say let count is equal to 0, where count is less than my contact list, right, dot length, count plus plus. And again, what it does is it creates a for loop, remember? Because EJS can do this. I'm just putting out the curly brace in the bottom. So here's my for loop. This is my repeatable area that I want, right? So it's going to loop through each of the items in my contact list, right, that I got from my database. And now there's only 3. It's going to loop through these 3 items, and it's going to create HTML that I need for each one of them. And we've seen this kind of pattern before in PHP, .NET, and a bunch of other ones. So it's going to look like this. I need a table row again. Inside my table row, I'm going to have some table data times 3, so 3 pieces of table data with a class of text dash center, right? And you can see that this is what the pattern looks like. So I'm going to get a new row for every piece of every document in my contact list collection. And in here, what I want to do is, instead of having static data, I want to make it dynamic. So I'm going to say that I want this piece to equal my contact list count, and then dot first name. Okay. And I want this part to be my contact list count last name. And this one would be, as you probably already guessed, contact list count dot h, right? Now, here's something that I need to ensure, guys, okay? First name, last name, and age. Where are these coming from? And why are they lowercase? Should they be lowercase? Should they be uppercase? Doesn't my schema say that they're uppercase? I'm pretty sure that it does. I mean, if I was going to look at my schema over here, right? Let's look at a couple things. My model schema, first name, last name, and age are exactly how I've written them now, just now, right? They need to be like this. That's the first thing. Second part, what the heck? What do you mean? There is no contact list, doesn't have an index. I don't understand. Contact list, if I'm not wrong, right, which happens to be this stuff, it has this. That's not an index. These are the things I want, but this is some kind of crazy hash. How the heck is it going to, like, loop through? You don't have to worry about it, is the answer. As soon as I load it up, I load each of these items. It's like I'm adding on each of the item to the list, right? So it creates its own internal index. I don't have to worry about what the actual ID is. I don't care about that stuff, okay? All I care about is that it's going to have a unique ID, whatever that is, okay? Are we good? So this should work now. I mean, if we did it properly and if we didn't mess up, when I go back to this and if I refresh, I should see that, right? Like this. So I got, first name, John Doe, last name, Jane Doe, kind of stuff. I got all this stuff. And if I want to add another one, let's say dynamically, someone else goes in and adds another person to my list. So let's say, I want to add another one. So let's add see if I can find it. Probably not in all these crazy things I did. There it is. I want to add another one. Instead of Sarah Joe, we'll make a Chuck Doe. Why not? Hey, Chucky. Chucky's a little older. He's 18 years old. He's part of the Doe family, right? And I enter that in. So I added one addition. Go back to here, refresh, and look what? We got Chuck Doe now too, right? Nice and easy. And the great thing about this is it stores everything. So whenever we go there again, it shows us our list. But the challenge that we have is it doesn't update the list. Nothing's watching the database for us, right? We're not watching for changes. But that's where Angular comes in. Angular has something called two-way data binding, and it uses this almost like event-driven, kind of framework that it watches. It uses an observable, is what it calls. It uses the observer pattern to watch for changes. The observer pattern kind of scans the database, and when the database changes, it refreshes the page with the new data, right? Immediately, which is kind of cool, which means I can have someone else on another instance of my portal somewhere else updating information, and bam, I'll see it like live on my page. Okay? Are you with me? Did you get this? You guys should have, because I kind of went really slow, in my opinion. Right? Well, I got to say that. I don't know. Well, it's either that or you're going to say, that's not slow. Right? Okay, but the key points, okay, that we have to review here before we move on to other stuff. Key points. One is, when I went through this, I used a repeatable template row that we're going to use over and over again. That's the 1 point. Okay, so point one, number one. The only way I can get this information is in my router, right? So if I go to my route, and by the way, one thing we haven't done, we made our route really ugly. Remember we talked about this? We haven't divided up our, we haven't separated our concerns here. We have routing, a model, and our controller all in one. No good. In the next iteration, we're going to take the controller part out of this. The logic has to be stripped out and put into another file, a controller's file, right? That all they do is have, the logic for our site. That's all we should be doing. We're not going to do that today. That's just another layer to confuse the crap out of you even more, right? We don't want to do that. What we did today, though, is we did split up our views into partial views, which allow us to do the stuff that we're doing. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of very simple what we did. Notice that on top here, we don't have any breadcrumbs. So we don't know which page we're on. Well, it kind of makes sense because our contact list page is on a page of its own, and it's almost like a subsection. So I can only get to it through the contact page itself. That's where I got this. One thing we should probably do, at least to clean up some of this, is to remove my console log. This is great for debugging, but it really slows our page down. All right, so console log should always be just there to help you debug. But once we've taken this out, you can see that if I press Control backtick now, I don't want this information always coming up on my console. This is to make sure that what I'm getting here is the same information that I'm getting on my website. Okay? Clear? This is great, but where we run into problems, and this is why I'm not going to do the next part of CRUD. Like we're sitting at 4 o'clock. Now, I've got to tell you this, that I'm way faster with you guys than I was with the first section because I messed up a lot less, right? But I'm going to tell you this, that in an hour and a half for me to do the other parts of CRUD, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be big. It's going to be a rush. And I'd rather not rush and do it a little slower. Where I want to go now is I want to talk about bringing this to the cloud. So yeah, this is great, but it's landlocked. That's how I kind of look at this. This is like locked into your laptop. I got no data that I can access at any time, anywhere. I mean, it's undoable, really. And what we do is we develop here locally. We have a small data set that we use to test to make sure that the page looks nice, right? But then we store all our data online somewhere, right, where we can access it from anywhere. So one of the great tools, and I kind of mentioned this before on the break, is MLab. MLab, if you sign into MLab, it gives us a chance to create an online database, a Mongo database for us. You can see that it's very small because we're using the sandbox version. So here's how you do it. I want to make a new, let's put it up online now, okay? Now there's going to be some problems. I'm just going to tell you ahead of time. No, Aaron, it's not going to be those kind of problems. It's not going to be a computer problem, okay? If you're thinking about that, maybe you are, I don't know. It's going to be a problem where we are blocked. In Centennial, I can't get to MLab typically. The port is blocked, okay? By the way, I'm on the wire right now. So I'm not on Wi-Fi at all. However, some people in the first section had success we're using the secured Wi-Fi. So if you go to secure Wi-Fi, you should be able to make this work. For me, it never worked, right? I don't know why. So I had to go with a hotspot to make it work, okay? And sometimes you get that. I mean, you're Centennial and you're blocked, it's security purposes. So first, let's create the database. The first thing is I want to create a new instance of a database. I have some options. Says, hey, who's your cloud provider? Amazon, Google, or Microsoft? Neither, none of them. But let's just choose something like Microsoft. Yay! I've chosen one. And then what's your plan type? Do I want to pay $180 and up, $15 and up, or free? I wonder. Free. Okay, I want to choose free. And on the bottom right, I want to choose continue. By the way, this is not for a, it's not for a robust web application that you're going to sell to a client. Don't use this. You have to pay a little bit for that. All right. But if you look at here, there's 3 data centers we have access to: California, which is far away, Virginia, which is a lot closer, and Dublin, which is even further. So let's use Virginia. And we can go to continue. And we're going to create a database. We need a name for the database. Again, I'm going to call this COMP308 W2019 dash lesson for B. That's my database name. Continue. It's of type sandbox. I'm good. My total price is free. Submit my order. Yay. And what it'll do, hopefully, is create a database, which is right here. Okay, there it is. And if I click onto it, you can see that it gives me a connection string. All right, so here's the connection string if I want to use the Mongo shell. No, I'm not going to use Mongo shell. So I can go Mongo, and instead of just doing Mongo, I can connect directly to the database by doing this. Okay, so even on the command line, I can upload stuff using the shell command if I want to do it that way. Okay. However, one thing I need to do immediately is create a new user. And this would be normal if you were using a database of any other type, whether it's SQL or MySQL or whatever. So if I click on users, there's no users. I need to add one. Let's add a user database. We're going to call my user, I don't know, Thomas. Sure. And my database password, I'm going to make it very simple. You have to use a alphanumeric character as well as other things. I'm going to use A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yay, it's not so complex. Do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And create. I've got a user, right? He's not read-only, and I'm pretty good. Next, I want to go into collections. Here's my collection. And I want to add a new collection. Let's call this collection first, just to match up with the database that I made locally. So here's my first collection. If I click on the first collection, like actually onto it, I can add a new document. Okay, now, right now there is no documents online. This is where we have a problem, right? We have documents we're maintaining locally plus documents we're retaining, remotely. We need some kind of data store where we have stuff. One of the things we can do to keep our documents straight, especially if we want to enter them again and again, is we can kind of use add document. And it says here, right now we're using just one document. You can see that there's a lot of space. I can actually type the document in there if I want to, or I can copy paste. I prefer to copy paste because, we have no time. So I'm going to go to here. We see our documents are nice and pretty. Let's make sure that all the documents are there. So I'm going to say like again, db.first.find.pretty. Now it shows me all my documents. I'm going to take one at a time here. I've tried doing it today by using all of it at the same time and passing it in as a didn't quite work. Let's try that again. Copy. And then what I can do is just copy that in, right? And then create and go back. And what this does is, oh yeah, you can't have this at all. You can't have your ID. It won't accept it because guess what? It was generated and I'm trying to pass in an ID that's trying to try and generate it again. I can't do that. So I have no ID, just this part. And then press create and go back. And you see it creates its own ID for you. Yeah? And let's add another one. So I'm going to add another document. I'm going to go back to here, grab the second one. And again, this is pretty tedious, but again, the stuff that we have locally would be not something that I wouldn't maintain a big list locally. It's just for testing. And there is a way to upload the entire database to MLab, but I'm not going to go into it right now. Not that involved, but it requires a little bit of code. So I'm just going to go here like this and copy this part. And go here and paste it. Get rid of this. What I'm trying to do here is get the same data in both locations, right? I mean, I think that's kind of an important test to make sure that they're the exact same. At least they can have my test data, which is what I've created here. I got one more. Okay, there we go. So I've got 4 little documents here, and you can see the good thing about MLab, it actually shows you all the documents in the collection. One at a time. You can show however many you want, up to 10 or more. Right now, there's only 4. That's why it doesn't give me that option. I'm looking at a list. I can also see it as a table. If I want to define a table view, I don't have that right now, so I'm not going to do that. If it says edit table view, I could do that define a new table view where I can add in kind of a list of stuff that's in here. I'm not going to do that at this point in time, but it kind of gives some flexibility in terms of what the table view would look like. All right, we have data. We have data. We have a collection with 4 documents, right? It takes 8.4K, very small. Huh? Yeah, it's huge.
Does the name of the collector have to be the same with what you have on
No.
the console?
I'm making it first because I know my model is looking for the first collection, right? Remember? That's why I made it the same. Otherwise, I wouldn't. So here's something that I need. This is my connection string, right? So my connection string I can take. So I take this whole connection string. And what I can do is if I go back to my code, I know that I have my connection string stored in my config db.js, which is here. And what I can do is I can make this my URI. Now remember, I can't use the same property, but what I can do is I can copy paste this in. And what I can also do is let's just comment this one out for now so we can use the new one. And this is the test, guys. So it's MongoDB, the username, and the password. So username, remember I made it Thomas? Try it for yourself. Try your username that you made. See if you have success. And my password is A6, right? Save my password. And now, if you notice, if I go control backtick, yeah, no, not working. Just try it, but it's not working. So the way to have success for you is, again, I've seen that if you can connect to your wireless thing, you can see that I'm not getting a connection. But if I use my, I know for sure, I've tried this today. If I use my hotspot, I'm good. Okay. Now I would use my hotspot, but I'm actually recording, right? And if I switch to my hotspot, I'm going to drop the recording, right? So I can't do that right now. But that's one of the things you can try and do. That works for me. It worked for me earlier today. And when I'm going to stop recording in a second because I want you guys to do a little exercise or start your exercise today. But this is what I want to kind of do, right? Did it work for you?
Since it has like a username as illegal escape character.
Yeah, it works for me. But I didn't do any escape characters. I literally just put this in here. So I've just changed the URI out from the default one to this one. Okay.
So you delete
Yeah, I deleted the other one. Okay. All right. Now if I switch back, just to let you know, if I go back to the other way around, so if I go da-da, and I switch this back to this, and I save, I make a change. I made a change. Now it's going to reload my stuff, and I'm connected nicely, right? So challenge for you guys. If you read the stuff on eCentennial, I want you to change the database. I want you to make another database. I want you to have a collection called favorite things. I want you to have yeah, I know it's really exciting. I want you to have 2 properties for your documents. One of them is going to be the name of the favorite thing, and the other one is going to be the description of the favorite thing, right? And I want you to make, I don't know, add a few, 3 or 4 favorite things of yours that you like, and modify the schema that we've defined and the page that we made, right? Because my page doesn't look for favorite things, it looks for people, right? Modify those things so that you can display your favorite things on the page. Bonus, make it work with MLab, okay?
You said like the school blocked up for, so you want us to
I can demonstrate on my own. Once I go on to my hotspot, it'll work. As long as you leave me your password and stuff for that particular database, we're good.
Oh, you don't.
Heroku, oh, I want 2 things. I want your zip file in this case because I may need to test it, and your the link to GitHub. Now, Heroku. Let's talk about that. So here's where Heroku is really good. So Heroku, we made kind of a Heroku site last week, right? And this week we want to try and connect to it. But here's the problem, right? it's going to be a little bit challenging for me, to connect to Heroku, when I have my local site. Think about this, right? My local site is only connecting to my local server. That's why I need this. It makes sense, right? My local server is going to connect to this thing, right? My Heroku stuff. So this is where we can test with Heroku. Let's test it with Heroku. So I'm going to take this back. I'm going to stop this tomfoolery right here, right? And then what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to switch back to my URI like this. Comment this part out, right? And I want to put this up on Heroku. And let's see if we're lucky enough to make it work online by getting Heroku to connect to MLab. Now, this is a good test because Heroku's not blocked by Centennial, right? It's up online. So up online to up online, no block, right? So it should work. So let's review the steps to go to Heroku. All right. So remember, we have to commit that for sure. So thank you for that. So here, what we have to do is, these are all the changes we made. We kind of staged all these changes, and I wanted to add them in. So I said something like, we did a bunch of stuff here. We split, kind of the partials, and actually added the ability to support to show our database, right? So displayed DB in view. That's what we did. And I'm going to push this to GitHub. So again, remember Heroku, what we did? Here's steps for Heroku. Step 1, go to Heroku. All right. Step 2, once we get to Heroku, when you log in, you need to make a new kind of node, if you will. We got a bunch of them here, and I'm going to erase them eventually. Let's go to new app. I want to call my app name something unique. COMP308, so unique. 2019, lesson 4A, Tom, 4B, Tom. So that it's, if you guys want to do 4B, it's okay. It's in the United States. I want to create my app. And in my app, I'm going to choose GitHub. And in my GitHub, I'm going to choose Centennial. I'm going to choose that name, so comp 308-W2019-lesson 4B. I'm going to search for that one. And here it is. I'm going to connect to it. I'm also going to set up kind of enable automatic deploys. That's what I want to do here. And I'm also going to deploy my branch for the master branch. So it's going to, let's see how it works. I haven't changed anything, so theoretically it should work the exact same way that we've worked before, right? And I mean, all I've really done is I've added Mongo and Mongoose support, right? So let's see if it works. So caching build. And looks like it's okay. And if everything goes well, then we should see our beautiful site running, right? Yes, right? So I can go to About, Products, Services, Contact, and the test is this. Yeah, baby. Right? So that's really cool. And it was actually fast, right? I mean, like, I found it was really cool. It's all online for you guys to see. So this would be your bonus. If you can make this go and work with MLab and Heroku, I give you a bonus on the exercise, a little bit of a bump, right, for it. So if you look at what's required on the exercise, you've got about an hour now to do it. If you would like to work today to get it done, I recommend do it. So you don't have to wait for the whole week to get it done. All I'm looking for is to modify stuff. And if you look at the exercise requirements, under week 4, it says, create a database using local MongoDB server. Give this database your name. So call it, like, if it was me, it'd be Tom, right? Create a new collection with named favorite things. Insert a few of your favorite things, right? Whatever they are. Your schema should include a name field and a description field, right? That's all they should have. Add a new model or modify the context model to work with your new schema because you have something totally different. It's not a contact anymore. It's a favorite thing, right? Change the index.ejs file in the views context folder to display your favorite things instead of contacts, or make a new route. That would be nice. That's called favorite things, right, or whatever, and make a list somewhere. Maybe you want to put it in About or someplace that you can link to it, right? For now, if you really don't want to do all that work, just change context so it works with favorite things instead of context, right? And then as a bonus, make this work with MLab, and if you can make it work with Heroku, all the power to you, right? I want a zip archive of your project files and link to your repo on GitHub. That's what I'm looking for. So that's it for me this week. I don't want to add anything else. I want to give you some time in class to do that lab. I think it's a good exercise for you guys to understand Mongo and MLab and routing and creating your pages and a bunch of other stuff that we did today. Next week, remember, we'll be doing two things. We'll be doing authentication and the last part of CRUD, which is we did read already. We're going to do create, update, and delete next week. Okay. And that's it for me.